I'm going to conclude this portion of this video clips for this class with some, again, reminders or more metaphors to think about stuff. Just again, to create conversation. Can be linked with somebody and some homework assignment at some point, but it's a way, again, to think about things. I'm always trying to find, again, simpler and simpler ways to articulate something that is a transferable thing, just like Jesus used agricultural examples and Paul war and sports or battle. I use sport examples a lot, but I'll use anything. And it's just a different way because you never know at what point somebody's going to have an aha moment. So let me speak here now. I'm going to compare and contrast American Christianity in its generalized state versus this picture of biblical discipleship. In American Christianity, we celebrate evangelism converts, but often make no serious provision for spiritual growth. And so there's this sense that they can be separated. We've spoken about that. But again, to have a convert without a plan to parent them, without a parent to parent them, or a plan to parent them, could you imagine that with your physical kids? Could you imagine getting your wife pregnant and farming out the child you just birthed, farming it out to an orphanage? Or it'd be unconscionable. It's crazy to consider. But that's how we do it. Either somebody up front at the church leads them into a relationship, or it happens as part of the service or a Sunday, or maybe it happens somewhere separately and they're invited to the local church. And at that point, it's like we wish them well. And can you imagine a baby that you find on the street, right? Because that's where you do find converts, on the street or in houses. Can you imagine just giving them directions to the local church and hoping that they actually go, that they actually meet anybody, that anybody's going to actually care about them or actually persevere with them? At best, generally, they'll invite them to church. And if somebody's bold, they might say, hey, we got a Wednesday night thing and something else. All of which they have to initiate in their own will while Satan is trying to steal the seed. And nobody's even attempting to grow their roots down. It's insanity. And when you look at your own birth children, or if you're single, think about when you have them. And you look at how newly converted people are treated in general, as a stereotype, in the American or the Western church world. It's not shocking that you have so many people fall away from the faith or say that Christianity is not all it's cracked up to be. And so we spend money and time on rallies and events and celebrate mission trips to convert. And we leave the parenting to someone else or no one else. It's Billy Graham's conundrum after the Los Angeles Crusade, or during it, I don't know the exact details, someone would, that he felt burdened. He was brokenhearted over considering that babies were leaving his tent. And he had no functioning plan. Now, part of my conversation, because I've been part of some evangelistic outreaches, is even if they set up some kind of functional follow-up, it's somebody who has no relationship with that person. And at best, I know I've been part of these things. They get some stuff in the mail. They have a conversation up front. They maybe give their address and phone number. Somebody might follow up, let's say they do. They might be responsive to this person they don't know who follows up from someplace they don't know. They have no relationship with them. They may or may not attend a deal, and this person may or may not call them a second time or invite them a second time. And they may or may not meet them when they go to the place. And if they don't see them as their own responsibility, they will just hope that things work out. And they might even pray that things work out. But they have no plan or provision that they work out, as if that was their own son. Could you imagine somebody treating their own son like that? Giving him a call to see if he wants to come to a family deal. And then maybe calling them again. And inviting them to stuff. What would you do if it was your kid? If you found out you had a child and they were on the street somewhere or somewhere in town and they were actually yours, how would you do it? What would you do? Would you be so disconnected from them that you feel comfortable at some point making a connection or two and then say, well, they didn't seem to want it bad enough? Of course they didn't want it bad enough. They've been unsaved their whole life. And they just had something where God touched their heart. And they're living in piles of baggage and difficulty. And they're facing an uphill battle. And the devil's trying to kill them. And we wonder why they don't return a phone call or show up for church where they don't know anybody and may not even be greeted at the door. Oh, man, don't get me started on this. In American Christianity, we celebrate converts like notches on our belts. We even keep measurables. Nobody measures if somebody stayed in the faith. Nobody measures how many seeds got stolen. Nobody measures how many seeds didn't get in the ground. Nobody measures how many people got choked. Nobody measures who actually came to fruition that was the Lord's will and minimum expectation. But we definitely have measurables. How many people we talk to, meet with, or who converted. It's the blindness of awareness of the responsibility to parent the lost who become saved is I don't know the words to describe the gap of ignorance and don't know you don't know cost. In America, a promiscuous man who makes babies from multiple women but does not provide for their care goes to prison. If somebody has 9 kids by 8 women, we look at that guy with disgust. But we might have a Christian leader or a pastor or an evangelist or just a very aggressive layman who has been part of multiple salvations because they got a heart to evangelize and a heart to reach the lost and a heart for people to come to know Jesus, but have no plan for their continuance in the faith, as if them raising their hand or asking Jesus into the life is a correlation directly to maturation when God already gave us the parable of the sower and talked about the narrow road and what they're up against. And the person who's part of that process, including churches, are still blind about who's got Stevie. When a couple, I've been to the park, even we had a party last week for my daughter's birthday, and I'm at a park with a bunch of kids playing around, and I lose sight of Riley, and I'm freaking out. I lose sight of her. I'm looking, and there's 1,000 kids, and I'm trying to find her headband or her dress because she's mine. Can you imagine if that was the attitude of the local church when somebody converted? It's like, where are they at? Where do they live? Are they doing okay? Are they coming? Can we go to them? Let's invite them over to the house. If they approached evangelism with a discipleship context like a parent, like they approach their own flesh and blood, who are out there, even at a park, let alone in a city or a country, what would it look like? What would the body of Christ look like if there was that ferocity? And so we celebrate converts. Dr. Coleman says, he said, make disciples, not converts. He never said made converts. He said, he who wins souls is wise, which is true. But he who marries people who get divorced and have destroyed children and destroyed legacy, that's not wise. And it's not wise to have a convert and win a soul that doesn't stay in the faith. That's not wise. Nobody's implying it's wise when that seed gets killed because it doesn't have roots and when it gets choked. That's not wise. That's not wise parenting. That's as if all they cared about was the wedding date and they don't even care if the people stay married. It's as if that because they don't have any consciousness about it. This is what we're trying to do to wake up the body of Christ to its responsibility to the lost, toward the place where they are mature and reproducing. In American Christianity, a person who evangelizes and makes spiritual babies with great skill is exalted by the church, regardless of their interest in their spiritual growth or longevity in the faith? Would those people who evangelize but have no plan to disciple at all, not even the little bit plan, would they say they care? Absolutely. But how can you say you care when you don't follow up or find somebody who will follow up? You say you care, but in action you don't care because they're flopping around someplace you don't even know, followed up by somebody maybe or maybe not. And you're more than willing to go out and make another baby, and another baby, and another baby. It's spiritually criminal. This is my opinion, and I say it this ferociously, partly because I'm trying to pick a fight. I'm trying to pick a fight with the body of Christ on this issue. I just am. Because unless there's a shock involved, they're not going to address this issue of what are we doing with the people who raise their hands or come up front or sign a card or whatever. What are we doing with them? Do we have a plan? Is it a good plan? Are we executing the plan? It is not a good plan to farm out your children to babysitters and daycare that you don't know who they are or what they're going to do with that child. That is a bad plan. And no parent with any consciousness would send their newborn, let alone their 1-year-old, let alone their 5-year-old, let alone their 10-year-old, to somebody they don't know and don't have confidence are going to treat them honorably, let alone use the window of time that they're farmed out there to move the ball forward in the relationship with Jesus. And yet we do that all the time. All the time. All the time. It's spiritually criminal, in my opinion, to emphasize evangelism over discipleship. It's as foolish and as inordinately as emphasizing the wedding day over the marriage, which America does also. It's a shame, and it's a destruction of the family unit. It's a destruction of the spiritual family unit. It's breeding disintegration within the family. People make virtually no investment into the marriage prior to the wedding. They may go to 5 or 6 counseling sessions where hard questions may or may not be asked, and odds are very small that somebody's going to be counseled to step away because everybody wants them to get married. They just want them to get married. They want them to have a wedding day, and they want it to be fun, and they want them to have a great marriage, but they don't serve them in accountability to prepare them for the reality of marriage. And there's no plan to follow up with them after marriage as thoroughly as necessary to make sure that that marriage actually sticks, let alone prospers. In the same way, we make virtually no investment of time into the training of new believers. Instead, we fixate on getting them saved. Can you imagine with my 6-year-old me saying, "Hey, I love you. I'll see you on Sunday morning for an hour. Then I got a bunch of stuff to do. But I'll see you and I'll shake your hand. I'll give you a hug. I'll ask you how you're doing. And then I'll see you sometime midweek for another hour. Between those times, you won't see or hear from me. I will invite you to a gathering that I may or not be at with people you don't know. And I wish you well. You're doing great." Can you imagine me doing that to a child? That would be, people would call that abuse. They'd call it abusive that I parent like that. That I think that that is appropriate, let alone healthy. But in the body, that's what we do. We do that and see that as doing our part. Could you imagine me being exalted for doing my part by getting together with my baby, let alone 2-year-old, let alone 7-year-old daughter or son, and meeting with them twice a week with no engagement between that point, forcing them to hunt me down instead of me checking in and being there to make sure that they have a chance to stabilize, get some kind of roots in the ground, and not get tricked and choked by the world that they've been living in voraciously maybe for decades. That's insanity.